I've, over the years, tried to keep journals, diaries, whatever you want to call it, on several occasions. Always been unsuccessful, except for this pile. Quite ratty, but you'll understand why. I'll explain. There are 5 books here, some rough notes. I'm going to be referring to this one for this talk. We'll let these lie. And this one in particular, I'm going to refer to a date on the 8th of November, no, the 11th of November, 1994. 11th of the 11th, 1994. It was just, I suppose, started out as a kind of a normal day. But, a normal day might require a little bit of unpacking. We were 4 guys that were traveling together at this point. And we'd been traveling together by this time for 2 or 3 months. So every day we were traveling. So in that context, it was a normal day. Every day felt like an adventure to us. I suppose it's a bit like if you say somebody wakes up in prison and has a normal day, and he's been in prison for 20 years, I'm sure he has lots of days that he would say are just normal days. But if you had to go and live that day out of the context of your life, it would be a bit unusual. And I think in this case as well, although I would say it was just an ordinary day, or it was planned to be an ordinary day, it didn't turn out that way. It's not ordinary in terms of where my life is now. So this happened 31 years ago. I haven't really referred to these journals in that 31 years since this happened until a few months ago. I thought it might be a nice idea to start transcribing these things. And I was, to be honest, I was a little bit surprised by what I found in them. Okay, so I'll tell you what the entry says at the beginning, and then I'll explain how we came to be here. So the 11th, 1994, we did an average speed of 18.4 kilometers an hour. My maximum speed that day was 68.3 kilometers, and we spent 4.5 hours riding. And we did a grand total of 83 kilometers. The plan for this day was to go to Sheshamani. The Sheshamani is a little place that we found on a map. And I'd heard of it years before. It was the place where Haile Selassie gave land to any Africans from the diaspora that wanted to go home. And Haile Selassie, whose Ethiopian name was Ras Tafari, was obviously venerated by the Rastafarians, and a group of people from Jamaica said that this sounded like a good idea, and they took him up on his offer, I think in the 1960s. And they went to Sheshamani. So Sheshamani was quite well known for a Jamaican Rastafarian community and also for hot springs. And for both of those reasons, we thought, the 4 of us, that we would go there. And this day was planned as an easy day. We thought 45 kilometers from where we'd been staying. We were staying near a little lake, about 3 kilometers off the road. So the idea was 3 kilometers down a dirt road to the tar road, and then do the 45 kilometers to Sheshamani, and we were going to relax and chill there for about 3 days. The story's a bit out of order. So let me explain. Myself, my name is Martin Christensen. I'm a South African. You can hear by my accent, I'm sure. And a friend, Michael Bowles, who was English. I'd met him in a hostel in Tel Aviv where I was staying. And another friend who I'd also met in the hostel, Pablo. He's from Bolivia. And Heiko. He was originally from East Germany. This hadn't happened long after German reunification. So we were all in the hostel in Tel Aviv, and we decided that we were going to ride bicycles to South Africa. And it wasn't like we were cyclists or anything. It was a bit of a harebrained scheme. I was working in a hostel bar, the roof bar, and Michael, the English guy, was probably my best client after myself. And he'd asked why I was there and what I was doing, and I had a map of Africa stuck up in the bar, and I told him that I had this plan to cycle back to Johannesburg. And he didn't have much going on at that point, and he asked if it would be okay if he bought a bicycle and joined me. And I thought, well, I don't know what I'm doing, so yes, that'll be fine. And Heiko turned up. He was actually a cyclist. He'd ridden a bicycle from Germany, and he'd ridden through Turkey, and he turned up in Tel Aviv. And when he heard there was another person there with a bicycle that was planning on riding to South Africa, he came and chatted to me, and he shelved his plans of going off to India to cycle and asked if he could join. So that gave us 3 people. And then just before the departure date, Pablo came, and he said he wanted to go to Durban. Of all things, he wanted to learn to surf, so go to Durban, and the bicycle seemed like a nice way to do it. So 4 of us set off. Ethiopia was our 3rd country. I don't know. Israel, Egypt, Eritrea, no, our 4th country. Ethiopia was in fact our 4th country. We'd had to fly over Sudan. So we'd been cycling in Ethiopia by the time this day started. We'd been cycling in Ethiopia for, I suppose, about 2 weeks, 2.5, maybe 3 weeks. It's a hard country to ride in. What you've also got to understand, the story's going to sound a bit vague because, we weren't too sure where the hot springs were and so on. In 1994, there was no internet. There was no GPS. And there weren't very good maps of Africa. So we had one enormous map, a Michelin road map, and that was what we had. 1 centimeter was 40 kilometers was the scale. So we were really crawling across this massive big map. We'd fold it up so that we could always see just the one piece that we were busy with. It would take us about 3 weeks to move off the page and have to refold it. So back to the story. 3 kilometers back to the tar road, and then 45 kilometers to Shashamane. I was just reading this entry, and I can tell you that what I'd written was tar road, unusual. North of Ethiopia had all been dirt. Fairly flat. It was actually, if I remember correctly, rolling sort of hills, but nothing too punishing. North of Ethiopia is it's brutal, absolutely brutal. It was all dirt roads then, and really rough, a lot of rocks and stuff, which made it very difficult on a bicycle. And monster climbs. We had one day when we rode 40 kilometers, and we climbed from 800 meters to 3,200 meters above sea level. It was nuts. It was nuts. We didn't know what we were doing. That's the other thing you got to understand. None of us were cyclists. I'd bought a bicycle when I was living in Fort Lauderdale. I bought a bicycle to go to work. And I'd become a little bit excited and caught up in the whole thing. And I bought a bicycle that was a little bit more than what I needed to commute 17 kilometers a day. And I bought a Cannondale mountain bike, one of the early Cannondale mountain bikes, no suspension at all. And then when I'd left Florida, I'd taken this with me, and I thought, well, I'm going to ride maybe from Jerusalem to Cairo seemed like a plan. And I don't know, I guess the idea kind of grew from there. That wasn't I'm not very good at planning things. So So we were tired by this time, and we needed a break. We wanted a place where we could spend a bit of time and just rest, do some essential maintenance on the bike, regather our energy before doing the final dash down to Moyale, which we figured was a week or week and a half away, maybe. I don't know. Moyale being the town on the Kenyan border. We were all looking forward to getting to Kenya because Ethiopia had been so hard. We'd had a lot of difficulty with children throwing stones and so on. So our heart wasn't really in the ride this day. To say, yeah, we're just going to do 45 kilometers, and then you don't really show up for it. So we sort of buggered around, and we stopped, and I was still smoking in those days. We stopped and had cigarettes and carried on. Eventually arrived in Sheshamane. It was about lunchtime by this time. And we stopped at a little restaurant, and, call it a restaurant. And we were sitting on the pavement outside and had some food, probably injera, what your standard Ethiopian fare. And we were, of course, accosted by a lot of the local people. We were a weird-looking bunch of people. And the people were just extremely difficult, extremely rude. I remember there was one guy who was like a hobo, who just dumped all over me because I was an obvious idiot to be on a bicycle. Why wasn't I in a Land Cruiser? Why wasn't I on a motorbike? I was obviously a loser in his eyes. So we had our lunch, and then we were asking the people that were helping us at the restaurant, where are the hot springs? We expected to sort of ride in there, and there would be hot springs and rusters welcoming us, and we didn't see any of that. And they said, no, it's out of town at a place called Wandagello. We couldn't find it on the map, and they said, there's about 16, 18 kilometers away. They weren't too sure. So we were a bit pissed off with that because we were like ready, to relax, and now suddenly we had another almost an hour on a bicycle, and we got the impression the road went out south on the tar road, and we'd go out south, and the road heading to Moyale on the border. That was the only tar road in the area, and we just assumed that was the road. So Heiko decided he wanted to leave a bit earlier. He was on a touring bike. The rest of us were on early kind of versions of mountain bikes. And he was having trouble with his bottom bracket, and his saddle was coming apart. His bike was a complete mess, this old touring bike of his. So he was struggling a little bit and said he would leave a bit earlier. So about 15 minutes before we set off, he went. So on good tar roads, Heiko was a lot faster than us. He was experienced, and the touring bike was faster than us on our road bikes. We would sometimes swap tires. I in particular I'd have slicks for tar roads and then off-road tires for the dirt roads. So the tar road, we were on slicks, just made it a lot faster. So 15 minutes after Heiko, off we went. A little bit of a tailwind was really nice. And about 10 kilometers from Sheshamane on the road, we thought, to Wandagello, we saw Heiko stopped on the side of the road in the shade of a bush reading a book. Not uncommon for Heiko to do something like that. So we stopped and said, what's going on? And he said, oh no, somebody had told him that. In fact, Wandagello wasn't on this road. Wandagello was on a dirt road that headed out east from Sheshamane. So he thinks like, well, we missed it, and we should just carry on. It's a waste of time. Because now the 48 kilometers now was already 58. So it would be yet another 10 kilometers back to Sheshamane. And to go back, oh no, we didn't feel like it. Pablo, however, was like, he was really enamored of this whole idea of going to Sheshamane and visiting the rusters. I think, because we knew we would get weed there. Which made it appealing to me as well, and to Michael. So we're going to have a vote. Heiko was like adamant, no, we must go on. Michael and Pablo wanted to go back. I didn't actually really care. But I was annoyed with Heiko at this point because I felt that he was being a bit devious with us and that he in fact knew that we were on the wrong road, and he had ridden just long enough to get us to commit to carry on and not go to these hot springs. And I think Pablo felt the same, which is why he was so cross and wanted to go back. Anyway, I sided with the others, but it would anyway have been a vote of 2 against 1 and 1 abstention, but I elected to vote with Michael and Pablo. So we turned around and we went back, unfortunately uphill, into a headwind. So things were getting worse now. We were, I don't know, by this time it must have been getting close towards 2 o'clock. Honestly, I don't remember the exact time. I didn't write it down in the diary. We got back to Shashamanian, we found the road, and we set off. Pablo and Michael still angry. And they were, if I remember correctly, they were actually on off-road tires, or they changed to off-road tires. And I was just feeling lazy, and I figured, it's only 16, 17 kilometers. How bad it can be? I'm not going to bother to change the tires. I'll just go on the slicks. But very quickly as we set off, I couldn't keep up with Pablo and Michael. Michael in particular had fantastic bicycle skills. He rode motorbikes off-road and stuff. So they quickly gapped me, and off they went into the distance. And I pulled away from Heiko because he struggled the most on dirt roads with his skinny touring bicycle tires. And it wasn't long on this road when things started to get ugly. You know, in the town already we'd found the people to be aggressive and threatening. You know, give me money, and if you don't, then they would threaten you. It was just, yeah, it wasn't my favorite place. Anyway, it creeps me out a little bit to think about it. So as we started going, we got separated, as I said, and I couldn't see Michael and Pablo. The road became quite up and down and twisty, so they were out of sight, and Heiko behind me was out of sight, and I fell once or twice. Not badly, I wasn't moving very fast. But what was most troubling was kids started to throw stones again. And we'd experienced a lot of this in the north of Ethiopia, children throwing stones. We'd had a little bit of it in the Sinai as well. Actually, I'd had people throw stones at me in Jerusalem too. I got lost in Jerusalem, ended up in Mir Sharim, Orthodox Jewish area, and little kids threw rocks at me. But anyway, it's a thing you put up with when you're cycling, cycle touring. But Ethiopia was like headquarters for being rocked, being stoned. So it just got worse and worse, and stone throwing turned into rock throwing. It wasn't like people were just throwing little pebbles, and they were shouting and give me money and what you want and all of that kind of thing. It just went on and on and just got worse and worse. It was quite awful. And I started to think, now he has a problem. Now the other issue is, because Michael and Pablo were ahead, the kids are alerted. So if you're the first person to go through and you're moving at pace, by the time the children see you and come running down from the hills and gather some rocks and start throwing, you're pretty much gone. Even moving slowly at 15, 16 kilometers an hour, which is kind of the speeds we would do on those difficult rocky roads. You know, dirt is fine, but it's when you got fist-sized rocks and things like that, very difficult on a loaded touring bicycle. So the thing is, Michael and Pablo going through, I would have guessed by then, they might have been together, but I probably Michael in front, because he really did have good skills. Anyway, by the time I arrived, the kids were locked and loaded, pockets stuffed with stones, ready to throw. And they can hurt. I mean, they hit you now and again, and it hurts. If you move slow enough, the kids will also run alongside and try and steal stuff off your bicycle, which can also cause you to crash. It got so bad eventually at one little village, I actually stopped, and quickly a crowd gathered, and I said to the adults, like, why? You stand and just laugh when the children throw stones, or you encouraging them. I mean, it's just like, why this attitude to people just visiting the country? I just didn't understand it. I was just met with blank stares and jeers and laughter. So I thought, well, I'm not getting anywhere with this, and obviously I just needed to get to Wondergala and the hot springs, meet up with the other guys. So I carried on going. Man, it just got worse and worse and worse. And then at one point I came around a corner and I heard like a really loud shout in English, and that kind of got my attention. I heard people shouting at me, and I turned my head and there was a flicker in the corner of my eye. And before I could take any evasive action, a rock, like about half the size of my fist, slammed into my face. Hit me somewhere up here. It was absolutely brutal. It brought me to an immediate stop with my head ringing. And I heard the kids shout, "What you want? What you want?" And I looked back and there were two little kids, and I think it was them that threw the rock, but I don't know. And they just looked at me and did like a double take, and they just turned around and sprinted off screaming. I guess they were like 10, 11, 12 years old. And I looked down and my shirt was covered in blood, and I was just like really seeing stars. And I pushed my bicycle to the side of the road, and I just like kind of collapsed there. Bicycle went down, and I sat on the verge and put my head between my knees, trying to clear my head out. I think I may have actually passed out for a while. And then I came to, and I thought, look, my head was ringing, and I was quite disorientated and a bit bewildered, and I thought, I can't stay here. It's just too dangerous. I thought maybe the people would finish me off here. I thought, like, if I'm moving, I have a chance. And anyway, what am I going to do? Just sit on the side of the road until someone comes to rescue me? There's no one coming to rescue me. I guessed I had about 10 kilometers still to go then. So I'd only done about 6 kilometers from Shashamane. So I got up, and I knew there was no way I could ride a bicycle. I just wasn't steady enough. I immediately already had this really, really sore head, and I was dizzy and very nauseous. So I started to push the bicycle down the road, and even that was quite difficult and quite slow going. So even on an easy day, if you're not pushing a bicycle 10 kilometers, there's a fair distance to walk, you know. I mean, I'm quite a fast walker, but on good ground and hiking boots, maybe I could cover that in 2 hours, but pushing a bicycle in my state, I knew it was going to be longer than that. I was in a bit of a state. I wasn't sure what the damage was. I could feel my tooth wasn't broken, but my mouth kept filling up with blood, and my whole front, my shirt was covered in blood, and blood was still flowing and dripping off my chin. And I would have given anything for a mirror. And the reaction of the people on the side of the road actually scared the crap out of me, because instead of standing around and taunting me and throwing rocks, they'd take one look at me, and you could see the look of absolute horror on their faces. And the children would just look and scream and run. And I thought, like, well, at least I'm scaring them away. but it wasn't ideal. And I don't know how much long after that, Heiko turned up riding his bicycle, and he looked at me and he said, "Did you break a tooth?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Oh, good." And he rode on. He just rode on. I was completely shocked at that point. I couldn't believe it. He just rode on, the bastard. So he did have a strange reaction to things that would go wrong, and we were almost in a bad truck accident a while later, and he just kind of hid away. Anyway, and we had a couple of incidents with him where, he wasn't good in those situations. So yeah, he rode on. I thought, well, a bit of help would have been nice. If he had have just stopped, I could have asked him what was going on with my face. I couldn't see. So I kept going. Eventually I came to quite a long downhill. So what I did is I I stood on the pedal. I didn't want to get onto the bicycle. I stood on the pedal and then just sort of balanced like that and managed to freewheel down. And when the hill ended, then I got back on the ground and carried on walking, went on and on and on and on. It seemed to go on forever. I won't lie. It just seemed to go on forever. I don't know how long I walked for. I suppose about maybe 2 hours, because the downhills would have been a bit easier and a bit faster, but maybe closer to 3. Eventually, I did get to Wandagala, and a little bit at the signpost, I saw, I think it was Michael and Pablo waiting for me. By this time, I was really not sure what was going on. I was very, very drowsy, and all I wanted to do was just lie down and sleep. And I thought that was a strange reaction to it. I thought maybe the shock. I don't know. And my vision had doubled. If I wanted to see clearly what was going on, I'd have to close one eye, left or right. But if both eyes were open, then I had quite severe double vision. Anyway, they were waiting for me at the Wandagala. It was basically like a little resort, almost tropical looking, lush, green. And they said, like, well, they helped. They took the bicycle from me, and I can't remember exactly what they said. They seemed also completely shocked. And they said that Heiko had said that I'd been in an accident or something, but they had no idea that I was in the shape that I was in. He hadn't really spoken to them. This was also pretty typical of where the group was by then. So anyway, they helped me get to where they were, and they said that it was just too expensive. We didn't have any money. I'd gotten to Ethiopia with like $250, and I don't know, I thought I would get to South Africa on $250. Look, I eventually did. But I didn't have money for expensive places. So they said to us we could camp, and I didn't have a tent or anything. So, my plan always was I slept in a little bivy bag, basically a big brown bag. I just lie on the side of the road and that. So Michael said I could sleep in his tent that night. So the two of us squeezed into his little tent. Yeah, there was a restaurant, and they said they didn't normally allow camping or people to stay that were, just to come and eat. You had to be in the lodge, but they made an exception for us. And I sat there with a little piece of cloth that I kept up on my mouth, because to try and stop the blood, and also because I thought it would look so grim, everybody would be grossed out by it. And I saw in the mirror, there was a mirror in the bathroom, and I managed to see I had like a 1.5 centimeter cut in my lip that went right through my lip, and a cut in my gum. I could put my tongue through the hole. The tooth was a bit loose, but I've still got it. No scar on my gum, but under my moustache there's a scar. So I ate a little bit, but I kept having to run into the garden and throw up. I wasn't able to get anything down, so I decided eating's not a good idea because I'm just wasting money. So I drink water and then throw it up, drink water and throw it up, and then went to bed. Had the most awful sleep. I mean, I was just so disorientated, and I suppose from the shock I just kept imagining people shouting and hitting and carrying on. So I had one of those weird sleeps you have after a very traumatic event. The next morning, we went and visited the springs. There were Rastas around. Could hear the Jamaican accent, such a beautiful accent. So we went to the hot springs and we had showers and we cleaned up. I was in no state to obviously to service a bicycle, but the others did. We decided not to stay for 3 days to get back to Sheshamani and to get back onto the road again. My heart had gone out of it by that time. That day we met a lovely group of Ethiopians that were there for a picnic. They had a little minibus, and I think Michael or Pablo told them what had happened, and they offered us a lift very kindly. And so late that afternoon, this would be on the 12th, the day after the rock throwing incident, they put our bicycles onto the roof rack and they gave us the lift, the 16 kilometers back to town. I found even that quite traumatic to go over that road again with that incident that happened. And we checked into a little, like, kind of a guest house thing for the night. I was still not able to eat. My double vision hadn't cleared up. The next day we woke up and I just slept and slept and slept and slept with this vicious headache. And then Michael went off. He said he's got an idea, and he said he needs some money, and I had a couple of dollars. I gave him $5. He came back and he had the biggest parcel of weed I'd ever seen. So we cleaned that up and secreted it around on our bicycles and smoked a joint. And that actually helped with the nausea a little bit. So that night I was able to eat a little bit. And that day actually Heiko had said he didn't feel like waiting for us. And I couldn't ride. So anyway, he'd set off. He said he'd meet us on the Kenyan border. And I was quite happy to see him go at that point, actually. And I think it was the next day we set off again. My double vision was just about okay. Now and again I'd close one eye to check where I was, and off we went. But I was very nervous on the bicycle. Every time something moved on the side of the road, I'd almost jump out of my skin. And if there were people, I would be very scared they were going to throw a rock at me. Yeah, and after that, it became like a bit of a sprint to get the hell out of Ethiopia. I just wanted to get out. That's all I wanted to do, was to get out of Ethiopia. So I left Ethiopia with not very good feelings. So it's very strange for me to come back and go through these journals. That's probably one of the rougher days. I don't know if it was the worst day. We had several bad days, but we also had some remarkably good days. Heiko, eventually we split up from him in Tanzania, I think. Yeah, Tanzania. We rode with him through Kenya. And we met up with him on the other side of the border. We got stuck at the border of Ethiopia and Kenya. They wouldn't let us through for about 3 days. They wanted a bribe. I was just refused point blank to pay it. I didn't have the money anyway. Yeah, so it was a fourth country. So after that it was Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Mozambique, and then back to South Africa. That was the plan, and that is what eventually happened. And I kept these journals. Not much has survived from those days. I mean, I'm not a very organized person always, and my life has been a little bit chaotic. So I don't have a lot of old things. I've got some side cutters that I bought in Fort Lauderdale, and I've got these journals. You can see how battered they are. It's hard riding a bicycle, and things take a hammering. Somehow or other this stuff survived. Somehow I didn't lose this stuff, and it turned up in a little bundle, and I've sort of become a little bit attached to them and started transcribing them. I don't know what I'm going to do with the transcriptions. But yeah, fluit, my story is uit. For those of you who don't speak Afrikaans, that's my story. It's done. And if you've made it this far, well, thank you. I'm a bit surprised. And I hope you found it interesting, entertaining. Maybe you would also like to do a bicycle ride like that. And if you do, I would say it's a great thing to do. Just be careful of Ethiopia.